Good Game, I'm Bajo.
And I'm Hex.
And in a strange happenstance of coincidences, all of our game reviews this week have Japanese origins.
Oh, that's true. We take a look at a reboot of the Capcom classic Strider.
Dave Callan is back with us to lock and load Bravely Default into his 3DS.
And is 13 days enough time to save the world? We find out in Final Fantasy's Lightning Returns.
And a new little slice of retro gaming for the show. I'll take a look at an old game that is very close to my heart. But before all that, can you name the game?
Let's go, Momo.
Okay, well, now it's time for the news with Goose.
Thanks, guys. President and CEO of Sony Computer Entertainment America, Jack Tretton, has announced his resignation and will step down on March 31st. Tretton started at Sony in '95 for the launch of the PlayStation 1 and remained with the company for a total of 19 years. His replacement will be Sony Network Entertainment International COO Sean Layden, who also served as president of Sony Computer Entertainment Japan. And in more PlayStation news, The Last of Us is being adapted into a full feature film. Sony and Naughty Dog are working alongside production company Screen Gems, with Evil Dead and Spider-Man director Sam Raimi currently set to produce. The game's directors Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley will also be involved, with Druckmann penning the script. And now it's over to Goose with the esports news. Thanks, Goose. 8 teams of Australia's elite Call of Duty players emerged from qualifying rounds to compete for a $15,000 prize pool and one of 2 spots at the Call of Duty Championship in LA. Through a grueling double elimination finals bracket, the grand final came down to dominant team Immunity and talented up-and-comers Trident T1 Dotters. An epic final unfolded as Immunity scored round 1 in domination, but T1 imposed themselves, taking the win in Search and Destroy in round 2, then continuing to play strongly, coming out on top 6 rounds to 4.
A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for T1 taking out the Call of Duty Championships to the ANZ Finals.
Both teams will now head to the US to represent Australia, battling against 32 teams at the World Finals at the end of the month. Now back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks, Goose. Okay, Bajo, it's reboot o'clock.
It's always nice to see an old school platformer dug out of the archives and rebooted, and Strider ticks a lot of the right boxes. Mostly they've recaptured his ninja-ness so well. He doesn't walk, he dashes, and instead of jumping, he somersaults. Plus he can climb walls and roofs like a ninja-ized Spider-Man. But mostly I'm just glad they kept his iconic sword intact. You can carve most enemies in half before they even know you're there. Later in the game he can reflect laser blasts Jedi style. Plus he can charge up a heavy slash to cut through enemy shields. Classic ninja.
Yeah, I think the speed of the combat and the 2.5D visuals do a really good job of balancing its old school roots mixed with that more modern twist. Mechanically, I think everything gels quite well, but the formula ran out of steam pretty fast for me. The original game was only a half-hour long, but it had a cracking pace, taking you from the futuristic city opening into Arctic wilderness and dense jungles. That city sequence only lasted 5 minutes in the original, but here it stretched out to 6 hours of endless blue rooms.
So many blue rooms. But I did enjoy those boss encounters. Mixing sword strikes with well-timed energy blasts was always satisfying.
The game also felt a bit conflicted to me. I mean, the original was pure action platformer, and there certainly is a lot of that here, but at the same time it's trying to be this Metroidvania-style exploration platformer, and I'm not sure it does it so well. The maps are huge, and they send you back and forth fetching things to open up new areas. I mean, that just becomes a bit of a chore.
I don't think so. I enjoyed finding those secrets, if not for anything else but to hear that iconic collection music. So iconic. Plus it reminded me a lot of Shadow Complex, which I loved.
I also had an issue with the difficulty. It just didn't seem quite right. Levels are packed with enemies that keep respawning, plus they shoot at you from off screen, and I really hate that because you can't avoid being shot to pieces.
Yeah, that is frustrating. And instead of finding a way to resolve this, they just gave Strider heaps of health so he soaks up all the damage.
Yeah, it just feels like a band-aid. But then after a few hours of mediocrity, they actually give Strider a bunch of really cool moves near the end of the game. Suddenly he can do these awesome double jumps and teleport around while flinging shurikens.
It's a shame they padded this game out so much, because when it hits its stride, it's a joy to play. What are you giving it, Hex?
Well, I liked a lot of this game's ideas, but they were just too few and far between for me, so I'm giving it 5.5.
I found I could forgive most of its flaws because it is a fairly cheap download, and I think that final act is really satisfying. So I gave it 6.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
And now for his good game debut for 2014, we warmly welcome back Dave Callan with his review of Bravely Default.
Oh god, this game is good. It is just so good. My goodness, it's good. I just love how good it is. Oh gosh, it's good. What? I have to say more stuff. Can I just sit here saying it's good for 5 minutes? No? You want details? Oh, alright then.
One final test of skill. Leave all to me. What in the world? So hurry!
Old school Final Fantasy fans rejoice because a relic has arrived from your glorious heyday in the form of Bravely Default, an utterly very good game apart from the dumb name which is not good. The plot concerns 4 crystals representing the elements which have had problems happen to them and need to be restored to stop bad people doing bad stuff to the land. Which all in all is a great excuse to wander around, hitting things with weapons, and firing magic spells, shopping for stuff, and healing. Oh, so much healing. There's lots of other Final Fantasy elements in this game as well. Phoenix Downs, Ethers, and characters with very annoying accents.
I take no orders from you! No orders!
That's just one trope you can't get away from in JRPGs. American voiceover artists doing that annoying made-up fantasy accent that can't decide whether it wants to be Irish or Cockney and ends up being an ear-assaulting blend of the two.
Without nature's form or bounty, our turbines went completely still.
What? My accent is not made up. How very dare. Anyway, the title of the game comes from the 2 modes players can use in battle. Brave is essentially attack while Default is block. Default not only protects you, but stores up action points that you can unleash all at once for a devastating combo. For example, you can stack a buff, a healing potion, and a magical attack all at once with enough points built from defaulting. So, basically, Bravely Default translates as Action-y Block, but that would be a very silly name. Almost as silly as the name of one of the main characters, Ring a Bell.
We've yet to meet, and I'm in love. My angel of fate. Could she be nearby?
Ring a Bell is a dandy pompadour sporting pickup artist character who relentlessly cracks onto every female character in the game.
Oh, to see those eyes don the sparkle of a smile.
I'm repulsed beyond words.
Thankfully, the scriptwriters hold off on having anybody make the obnoxious joke, "We haven't met before, but the name rings a bell." Eh? Ooh, tough crowd. The other characters in your party are a hero archetype, a light vestal, and a dark sorceress turned good.
This sort of indiscriminate slaughter cannot be allowed.
It's great to have a gender balance in the party, the 2 male and 2 female clan creating more or less JRPG ABBA. In Bravely Default, your base character and their jobs separately level up, giving you new buffs and abilities. So with 4 characters, you're constantly getting that leveling up excitement, combined with a rapidly expanding combat system. Which is great, because the enemies are awesome. There are JRPG staples, like blobs of slime with very low hit points. Seriously, why do these blobs attack well-armored travelers? They haven't got any armor. Or limbs. They're just essentially pincushions. Then there's other more imaginative enemies. Giant attack turtles. Weird owl wizards. and I'm fairly sure in a video game first, a Minotaur zombie. A Minotaur zombie. The difficulty is adjustable, and on medium provides a very good challenge. You will hit a few bosses that make you go away and lick your wounds and realize you're gonna have to grind to make a bit of progress. Enemy encounters are of the random kind, but you can adjust how frequently these happen, which is great. Overall, the enemies are well thought out. For example, the zombie versions can be damaged by using healing items on them, and they harm you if you try to use any life drain magic. The artwork is stunning, probably the best portable JRPG background design I've ever seen, almost Studio Ghibli in quality. And it's all in glorious 3D, so the depth of field really adds to it. When characters stand still, the camera zooms out and it shows the full scale of the artist's work. The home city of Caldisla is beautiful. It looks a lot like Edinburgh Castle, only with less toothless, drunk Scottish people asking you for money. There are so many other beautiful and imaginative environments to explore. Flamey castles, ghost ships, and a broken down wind city. Street Pass is implemented beautifully in this game. If you pass another 3DS player also playing Bravely Default, you get a whole bunch of stuff from them. Firstly, the ability to call them into battle with their specially chosen attack.
I'm bored of you!
Secondly, they give you a little villager to come work in your village of Nerende, which is sort of a home base on the lower screen. Rebuilding the village gives you access to shops to buy special weapons, items, and armor. Each little villager you have working on Nerende speeds up the amount of time it takes to rebuild and access all those lovely bonuses. So many digital hands make light the work, and street passing somebody else with Bravely Default is a big happy deal. Characters can be assigned any of the jobs in the game, and by jobs here we are not talking accountant or charity mugger. We are talking good jobs here, like sword master, ninja, pirate. Each job or character class has its own look, abilities, and skills. The game's overall morals are lovely. It shows the karmic results of bad and good actions beautifully and contains lovely messages like be fearless and go wherever your heart takes you. Only Ringabel is a less than ideal human due to his constant womanizing, but the slapdowns he receives are comedy gold.
Just what manner of technique do you look for in a man?
Sorry, I'm pretending I misheard you.
Although this game is really amazing, there is always room for improvement. The dungeons are very basic affairs, simple mazes with the occasional lever puzzle thrown in. I would have liked for the developers to have taken some inspiration from classic dungeons like the ones in Zelda 64, or maybe even the ones in the recent A Link Between Worlds. How is that, Miss Producer? Is that enough detail for you? I kind of just want to get back to playing it. You will love this if you're a fan of old school Final Fantasy or JRPGs in general. I had a great time here. Oh gosh, it's a good game. 9 out of 10 for action-y block.
It's hard to describe how I felt the first time I booted up Another World on my Mega Drive. I had never seen anything look and play like this. Another World, or Out of This World as it was known in the US, was a cinematic puzzle action game released in 1991 on a variety of platforms. It was created by Eric Chahi, and it used vector outlines and a rotoscope animation technique to create that clean-coloured 3D effect. A technical feat for the gaming and PC systems of the time. I must have watched that opening cutscene 20 times in a row. It sets up such a chilling atmosphere which lasted the entire game. The abrupt way the car skidded in, the shading on the legs and shoes. Then as the lift travelled down and the music increased, you got the sense that something very dark was about to happen. Who was this red-haired man? What was this lab all about? What were these strange symbols? Then, as he popped a three-dimensional can of drink open, things went horribly wrong. It was the start of what was going to be a very long, cold, and punishing journey. You were a man in a strange land fighting to survive. One false move, and it was death. In fact, much of this game was simply trial and error, but it was always tense. What I found most unique about this game was that each new screen was a new puzzle to solve, yet it still rewarded you with exciting action sequences and glorious cutscenes. It really was a landmark game, full of beautiful imagery and frightening, brutal deaths. And after dying 1,000 times, the game ended with an emotional and perfect scene, as you and your new friend fly off into the distance aboard a strange alien beast in a strange land, perhaps never to return home after all.
It's time to dive back into the crazy world of Fabula Nova Crystallis as we join our stoic pink-haired heroine one final time in Lightning Returns.
Lightning Returns is an action RPG set 500 years after the end of Final Fantasy XIII-2. The god Benevelzar has awakened Lightning and tasked her with saving the souls of humanity, because apparently the world is ending in 13 days. In exchange for this, Benevelzar promises to reunite Lightning with Sarah, who died at the end of Final Fantasy XIII-2. Maybe, if Benevelzar is pleased with Lightning's handiwork.
You spend most of your time on what remains of Grand Pulse. But at 6 AM each day, you're automatically teleported back to the Ark, a place where time stands still. Hope is somehow there and back to his younger self, and acts as your navigator and all-round go-to guy throughout the game.
As long as you're here, you're safe. You can rest and not worry about what's happening in the world below.
He's kind of like Alfred. But there's also a new mysterious girl called Lumina, who seems to know what's going on.
God turns her into the savior and it all goes straight to her head.
Which is good, because I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, if you thought Final Fantasy XIII and XIII-2 had complicated stories, get ready for a whole new layer of absurdity. Here are some problems that I have. Why does Benevelzar need Lightning to rescue souls? And why awaken Lightning with only 13 days till the end of the world? Why not give her 500 years to save more souls? Also, how am I running around a city looking like the exact pink-haired description of their most wanted person? No one but the guards blink an eye.
Yeah, it's so confusing, and I tried really hard to keep up with the plot this time around, but all the different names for everything. Iradia, Yggdrasil, Valhalla, Etro. Then there's New Cocoon, which is different from Cocoon, but contains the Ark and is also known as the place Benevelzar.
The Ark is the remains of the artificial cocoon,
which is different from the god Benevelzar.
Benevelzar.
Plus throw in time travel and sleep stasis and nope, I'm lost. I'm sure if you're a hardcore Final Fantasy fan, then some of this will somehow make sense to you, but I think for your average human, this is not gonna happen.
Yeah, it's all a bit ridiculous. There was one silly mission that had you convincing a play director to blow up his own set and let you, a complete stranger, be his lead girl, in order to have a big grand finale so that you could break into the palace. And if that's not ridiculous enough, the director wants you to look really pretty, and where of all places are you gonna find a pretty dress? By fighting in a slaughterhouse competition.
After all, that garb is one that I made myself. I will not hand it over to someone who would only sully it.
Yep, first prize in a monster tournament is a pretty dress. I'm sorry, but who enters a fighting tournament with the hopes of winning clothing?
It's a classic tale, Hex. But yes, that mission is so ludicrous. For example, why do the fireworks technicians shoot the fireworks so the set catches fire, and not just off the side or something? And that the set falls over in just the right way for Lightning to skip across into the palace. I don't mind a bit of silliness in my fantasy games, Hex, but I like it to be at least a bit believable.
Story aside, right from the start of the game though, you're given free reign pretty much of whichever area you want to explore or missions you want to tackle, and that's such a welcome change from the last game. There are 4 distinct areas to explore. the religious center of Luxarion,
Most of the people who live here worship the almighty benevolent.
the entertainment and pleasure city of Yuznan, the last remaining area with greenery called the Wildlands, and the ancient ruins of the Dead Dunes.
I liked how each of these areas feel different and distinct, and it's always good riding a chocobo in the Wildlands. It's just a shame that the missions are so boring. It's like they've taken the worst quests from MMOs and that's what you do most of the time.
Wait! I have a fantastic idea. You wouldn't be able to help me accessorize, would you? Can you collect adornments for me? If I see enough of them, it might trigger my dormant fashion sense.
And quests are the only way to level up your base stats, so you have to do fetch quest after fetch quest after fetch quest in order to be strong enough for a boss fight.
Okay, be completely honest. What do you think? Is this my new look? Am I new and improved?
It's good. A definite improvement.
So, I hate to ask you for another favor, but can you collect more adornments for me?
There was one quest that had you running around the city to find 13 clocks, and you had to make sure that they were all telling the right time. I mean, talk about mundane. Plus, there are no waypoints for side quests, and there are sections of the map that are blocked off at certain times, so you could be right at the end of a quest only to realize you have to return to that location later. I mean, that just felt unnecessary. And it's also a real shame that you don't get any experience points from battles. It just made me end up skipping half the monsters I came across, even though the combat is probably my favorite part of this game.
Yeah, and that's the good news really. The combat is more action-orientated and focused. Attacks and spells take up a certain amount of ATB, or active time battle points, but you have 3 different schematas that you can switch between at any time, and each schema has its own ATB gauge. This means you almost never have to wait for your ATB gauge to replenish like in the last games. You simply switch schema if you run out of points. Plus, there's a big emphasis on guarding, because if you guard at the right time, you can negate almost all damage that would have been taken and stagger enemies quicker, which makes them more vulnerable to attacks.
Yeah, it all just makes it so much more fun and exciting to fight now instead of just pressing auto battle. And there's a lot of gear to consider too.
Final Fantasy fashion!
At least it's not all cosmetic though. You can equip each schema with its own set of clothes, weapons, shields, and accessories that will affect your stats, and up to 4 abilities for each outfit as well. So you can have 3 distinct classes or jobs that you can switch between at any time.
Yeah, it's such a great system for encouraging you to switch up equipment every hour or so. But it also feels like such a waste because, once again, where's the incentive to actually have these battles when they don't make you any stronger? You can just run around enemies to avoid them. The only benefits to combat are to get money and energy points that you use for things like escaping battles and slowing time, as well as some items. In the end, you're going to have to do all of these boring quests that we've been talking about. And you're going to have to do it in a Dead Rising-like time limit.
Yeah, that time limit just seemed like a really lazy way to create a sense of urgency, and it didn't seem necessary at all to me.
You need to return to the Ark at 6 every morning, without question. Remember that, Light.
I get that it plays into the story and that you have to save as many people as you can within a certain number of days, but also, this is an RPG. I don't want to roam the cities and explore and talk to people at my own leisure. Instead, I felt constantly pressured to do something productive, otherwise I'd wasted a day.
Another big change is that you no longer recover all of your HP at the end of battles. So especially at the beginning of the game, when you're still getting used to guarding and you don't have any healing spells, I found myself having to escape a few encounters. But you're penalised an hour of in-game time for fleeing.
You escaped from harm, but in the outside world, a whole hour has passed already.
And that just felt unfair because you don't always know if you're strong enough to do a fight in the first place.
Yeah, so much of this game felt like it was punishing you, but, you know, not in a good way.
It's quite a good-looking game, though. And there are some nice locations. But there are some areas that are confusing to navigate. But we do have some good cloth physics. And Lightning's hair is still pretty.
I actually think Noel wins the hair award. I like the way it swishes in the wind.
I struggle with that persistent battle music, which feels like a cheese grater on my ears.
I will fight evil.
Even after 3 games though, Hex, I still don't find Lightning interesting as a character. She's boring.
Yeah, she's pretty cold in this game as well.
Maybe that's how God wants it.
Maybe emotions in his servants just distract us from what we're supposed to do.
Well, Final Fantasy thoughts, Bajo?
Well, there was not much fun to be had here. Technically, everything seems to work, but I just did not care about anything in this game, so I'm giving it 5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
I really liked the combat, but that's not really enough for me to recommend this game to anyone. I really hope the future of Final Fantasy games gets a big shake-up, because I'm giving this 6. So, did you name the game for this week? It was... Are you ready for this? Xenosaga Episode 2, Jenseits von Gut und Böse.
Really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
It was released in Japan in 2004, then later around the world in 2005 on the PlayStation 2. A highly anticipated game after the success of the first Xenosaga, it was poorly received by both fans and critics at the time. One of the main criticisms was the quality of the story, which was a major point of contention between developer and publisher. And it's our Guess the Game because the English version featured the voice of Ali Hillis, who is also the voice of Lightning in this week's Lightning Returns.
Next week, your Titan is ready.
Bish, I'm tracking McCallan's team in the sewers. Doing okay so far.
Copy that. Keep your fingers crossed.
And Snake makes his shadowy return in Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes.
And over on Spawn Point on ABC3 this weekend, we shoot for the moon in a space special with reviews of Starbound and Out There.
Till next time, may all your games be good ones. Hex out.
Bajo out. And one of my favorite things to do in Starbound is to teleport to your friendships, and then you just fill it with like the hardest material you can find. So they have to spend ages just digging it out.
Oh,
and then
sucks.
when they're about halfway through, you teleport back in and just drop a bomb and then teleport out and it blows everything.
How
all
do you
their
even
gear
come up with
and
these
the
trolls?